Today we did our second live stream on this channel, and we watched a video by IamLucid called Evolution, School's Biggest Lie. The chat voted that I do an official video of that, so here we are yet again doing this same video. Now you may notice in the background that there are sheets on my couch where I have just been napping. That is because I intend to go back to sleep immediately after this video, but I thought we should address it. So please, try your best to ignore that as we watch this quite amazing video.
I'm skeptical of the claim.
I'm skeptical.
I see a lot of intelligent design people, and this is a document they released called A Scientific Dissent from Darwinism. If you didn't know, intelligent design creationism is essentially just rebranded creation science because creation science was made illegal in schools in a Supreme Court decision in the late 80s, which classified it as religion and not science. They rebranded and released things like this pile of complete garbage.
We are skeptical of claims for the ability of
random mutations
And natural selection.
to account for the complexity of life.
Well, I mean, you can be skeptical of whatever you want, but that doesn't make you right about it.
I wrote about 10 icons of evolution in my book. I could have written about more,
Is it just me, or is this piano, like, super loud?
but I had to stop somewhere.
Survival of the fittest has had a disastrous history.
Does not sustain any kind of Darwinian prediction that can be intelligently derived from Darwinian.
We don't even know how to define life, let alone knowing how to spark it to begin.
Just nonsense, pure nonsense, these intelligent design people.
Taught you that we came from apes. They said that this theory was so solidified in reality that it's practically a fact.
You know, I gotta say, I really like the guy's hair. That is awesome. And I really, really love the hoodie that says virgin on it. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with being a virgin, and I just think that's one hell of an aesthetic. Right on, my dude.
They lied to you. Lock in with me and let me fix your brain.
Yeah, if there's one person I trust to fix my brain, it's this guy.
Now, before all of the biology majors start flexing in the comments down below with their PhDs, classical music, and British accents, let me explain myself.
Yeah, before you smart people with your fancy degrees and knowledge about how things work chime in, let me just set the record straight.
I am not anti-evolution. I do believe that human beings actually have evolved. We have seen this, we can measure this, it's an undeniable fact, but it's on a much smaller scale, and more importantly, a scale that we can actually test. These can be measured within human populations that I'll explain later on in the video.
Okay, so the first note we have to make on his argument here is that creationists do this a lot. They'll do this thing where they say, I don't have a problem with microevolution. Evolution on small scales is fine with me. But then they'll say macroevolution is a big problem. But really, there's not a difference between these two things. Microevolution over long enough periods of time leads to macroevolution. They define microevolution as being change within a species and macro as change to a new species. But that change to a new species doesn't happen overnight. It is the result of an aggregation of smaller changes over a very long period of time. So there's no reason to, make that separation, but that's a key point on which their arguments tend to hinge. So anytime you hear this, just think to yourself, if you've never heard this one before, microevolution leads to macroevolution over long time scales.
But I do believe that humans actually have evolved. Let's clear up the first of the...
I gotta say, I really like the editing and stuff. This really makes me want to step my game up. I probably need a better camera, honestly.
Biggest lies. With neo-Darwinism, the evidence revolves around the theory and not the other way around. The bias will become
wrong already. YouTube's algorithms operate on watch time, so if you like this video and want to see it get further with the algorithms, please watch just a little bit more than you were planning to. Even another minute helps a lot. Thanks, and let's get back to the video.
A lot more clear to you as you watch the rest of this video. School left this part of the textbooks, but Darwin himself actually said, analogy would lead me one step farther, namely to believe that all animals and plants are descendant from some one prototype. But analogy would be a deceitful guide.
Okay, I should point something out here for all of our creationist friends who don't understand how science works. Charles Darwin is not evolution Jesus. Charles Darwin does not have the final say on evolutionary science. Charles Darwin did not even invent the concept of evolution. He did, however, notice it and make some amazing works on the subject, including On the Origin of Species and Descent of Man. These works were revolutionary for the time, but they were not the first in the genre. There were other forms of evolution that had been proposed earlier. It just so happens that evolution by natural selection was an astoundingly new idea that really changed everything. But that does not mean Darwin is the be-all, end-all of evolution, even by natural selection as he defined it. He was the start, not the finish. He is not evolution Jesus. Somebody said this in the chat today, so I'm going to use that line. He is not. We do not look up to Charles Darwin for all our information on evolution, and I think the reason why they make it sound like we should is because they find it more comfortable that Darwin maybe agrees with them sometimes, or seems to, but analogy may be a deceitful guide. But it isn't. We actually have solid proof of universal common descent, as they like to call it, in DNA. DNA proves the interlinkages between species all the way back to the beginning of life on Earth. We have that now. And so we don't need analogy in this sense. We have the information, we have the knowledge, we have the understanding, we have the extensive fossil record that proves all animals and plants came from one single life form, potentially billions of years ago.
But you're taught in school that he said the exact opposite, aren't you? That Darwin himself believed that we all came from one single prototype, when in reality, in his books, he says that he doesn't believe that. That's because school taught...
It does not matter what Charles Darwin did and did not believe. That is not how science works. Science is not about authority. You don't simply have a scientist invent something and he is forever the final say. No. Science is a process. It's a process of continual improvement. As we discover more, our ideas change. Darwin was revolutionary, but he was the beginning, not the end.
You neo-Darwinism, not Darwinian evolution. The differences are vast. Darwinian evolution was based on Darwin's observations. The theory is based within the scientific method and does not have such far-fetched conclusions. For an example, he believed in natural selection within reasonable limits that would be an undeniable truth. Neo-Darwinism is a fork of Darwinism. It's modified and often politically charged. It tries to find definite answers deeper than Darwin ever claimed.
Politically charged. Okay, so I think another thing that's really important here is that these terms, as he is using them, are nonsense. Darwinism and neo-Darwinism are really only terms you're going to hear within creationist circles typically. Now, there are valid scientific uses of terms like Darwinism and neo-Darwinism, but these people don't have any grasp of what that is or what it means. Most scientists simply do not use these titles. So let's keep that in mind.
It does this through an artificial epigenetics and genetic mutations beyond the normal three, which are insertions, deletions, and duplications. This theory brings in specific gene expression.
It looks like he's quoting Dawkins here, talking about the selfish gene, but he didn't quote it for very long. Notice, he didn't quote it for very long, probably because he didn't want us to read the rest of it. Let's see if there's anything there of importance. Let's go back.
Normal three, which are insertions.
Okay. The article argues that the gene-centric interpretations of evolution, and more particularly the selfish gene expression of those interpretations, form barriers to the integration of physiological science with evolutionary theory. A gene-centered approach analyzes the relationships between genotypes and phenotypes in terms of differences. Change the genotype and observe the changes in the phenotype. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing these wrong. We now know that most frequently this does not correctly reveal the relationships because of extensive buffering by robust networks of interactions. By contrast, understanding biological function through physiological analysis requires an integrative approach in which the activity of the proteins and RNAs formed from each DNA template is analyzed in networks of interactions. These networks also include components that are not specified by nuclear DNA. Inheritance is not through DNA sequences alone. The selfish gene idea is not useful in the physiological sciences, since selfishness cannot be defined as an intrinsic property of nucleotide sequences independently of gene frequency, i.e. the success in the gene pool that is supposed to be attributable to the selfish property. It is not a physiologically testable hypothesis. I thought this guy may have been quoting Dawkins, but now I'm not exactly sure who he is quoting. I am sure, however, that he does not understand almost a word of this, personally.
Insertions, deletions, and duplications. This theory brings in specific gene expression and draws bold conclusions from vague evidences. I'll explain more later.
Oh, vague evidences. No, the evidence is not vague. The evidence is incredibly strong, and I would encourage him to look into the evidence. I mean, there are consumer-level books I recommend all the time about exactly this sort of stuff. And as much as I disagree with Dawkins on politics sometimes and trans stuff, I must say his book, The Greatest Show on Earth, The Evidence for Evolution, is phenomenal at explaining evolution and how it works. The man is a legend in the field, and rightfully so. I would encourage anyone who wants to understand evolution better to read that book. It could do this guy a whole lot of good.
They're on in this video, but this is the most known theory, and Darwin is wrongly credited for the creation of this theory. It's what you're taught in school, and it's...
No, Darwin is credited for coining a specific type of evolution by natural selection, survival of the fittest. That is what we attribute Darwin with. Now, evolution itself, the overall idea of evolution, how it's changed since Darwin, technically, you can also attribute that to him in some sense because he did come up with the ideas that are now most common. There shouldn't be a problem with that. I mean, the theories that were invented a long time ago by certain people to explain certain facts, we may have improved on those theories considerably over time. But we do still tend to refer to certain people as the originators of those theories, even if they didn't have them absolutely perfect, which people rarely do.
not the truth. The neo-Darwinist leading theory of how they assume life started on Earth was by something called abiogenesis. To put simply, a pond of amino acids got heated from hydrothermal vents in the ocean floor that eventually evolved into all different types of life.
Okay, that's one potential pathway to abiogenesis, but that is not the only pathway. And the fact that he's making it sound like that's the only way it can happen is kind of silly. We don't know the exact process yet. We are still trying to figure that out. So, but it is kind of like ridiculous to just like point to one specific idea and say, this is definitely how scientists think this happened. It makes things simpler, and these people love to make these things simpler for the obvious reason that it makes their opposition sound kind of silly.
Natural selection over time plus random DNA copying mistakes somehow equals all of life on Earth. It's a...
Well, not exactly in those terms, but yes, if you have enough small changes through mutations in genes over a long enough period of time, that's what happens. You end up with an incredible diversity of life. I mean, hell, just think about your own family tree and how diverse it is. I mean, I think even my family, which is like pretty like British, I mean, we are like 90-something% British through and through. I mean, none of us look alike. We look very different. And that's just the small things in like one specific little family. So you can imagine like the wholeness of life over billions of years is going to be quite more extensive than that.
Sad attempt at drawing a conclusion of the origin of life. In my opinion, it's unbelievable to even accept this theory. Even if this was possible, it doesn't go into the...
Yeah, it's so unbelievable. I think there was a magic beardy guy in the sky who came down and like picked up some clay and was like, breathe, be alive. And that's how man was made, but not woman. In fact, he cast a spell on that guy he just created and stole his rib and went, woman, and there was a woman. That is the reasonable explanation for at least humanity.
Maintenance and subsequent reproduction of the organism that was created. Furthermore, prerequisites to this theory such as spontaneous generation, which is basically saying that something can come from nothing, or life can come from no life, which is obviously not true, was actually disproven in the...
Well, first of all, is that exactly untrue? Spontaneous generation, yes, spontaneous generation is untrue. Life does not spontaneously generate from the ether or whatever. That part is true, but let's just point out something here. For there to be life, it had to come from non-life. That is beyond dispute, whatever your explanation for it. Now, we explain it as more scientific-minded people by evolution through natural selection, and that leads back to abiogenesis. So that's one pathway. But he also believes that life came from non-life. He believes that God assembled the parts, like, I guess, I don't know if I'd call it clay, but the dust of the earth, and then formed it and breathed life into it. And then that non-life became life. So he wants to act like life can't come from non-life, and yet, whether one accepts abiogenesis or the creation story in the book of Genesis, life did come from non-life. I don't know why he hasn't thought about that. Seems pretty obvious to me.
19th century by a French chemist named Louis Pasteur. And before him, it was thought that if you close a jar of milk and then bacteria grows inside the jar of milk, it was because the milk would produce this life spontaneously. And that the life would come out of nowhere, almost as if it was a...
Yeah, it was wrong. That idea was wrong. What point are you getting at here? We know that idea was wrong because we disproved it. I mean, not me personally, but scientists, scientific-minded people disproved that idea.
a magical creation. He came to the conclusion that there were already organisms alive inside, and the bacteria there we just couldn't see. So that's why it would grow, because it was always there. It didn't just come out of nowhere. Additionally, abiogenesis has never been recreated, and the closest scientists have come to recreating it is the creation of simple peptides using artificial conditions. The peptides created were not capable of having a secondary structure, let alone a globular structure, whilst at the same time ignoring all the conditions required to keep that enzyme stable and prevent it from denaturing artificially.
I do not think this guy understands a word of what he's saying. He has assembled this from somewhere. I don't think he understands any of this, and one of the reasons why I don't think he understands this is because Professor Dave did a video on this where he explained in a lot greater detail than I can why this guy is wrong. And he points out over and over how this guy just seems to be misinterpreting everything terribly. And so it shouldn't really be like surprising, of course. I mean, this guy, I don't think this guy is a chemist. I don't think this guy is a biologist. I don't think this guy is a scientist of any type. He may be an engineer or something. Apparently there are a lot of creationists who are engineers. But he does not know what he is talking about. Let's just lay that out there. He doesn't have the expertise to understand what he's talking about. And frankly, I think it's kind of weird when people who have no expertise tell scientists who have a great deal of expertise, well, this idea that you have is just silly. The problem with creating new life in a way similar to abiogenesis for humans is that life had billions of years to spring into existence. Billions, potentially, of years. Scientists have only been studying this problem for something like, what, 150, 200 maybe? And obviously, we are getting further with it. We are managing to do better and better in our attempts to get the formula correct to produce life. But that being said, we can't expect it to be an easy process. If it took nature billions of years to do it, why should we be able to do it so easily? The fact that we haven't done it yet doesn't mean we are never going to do it. There's plenty of things that we just haven't been able to do yet that we know are possible. Think about fusion reactors. We know that fusion is possible. It's possible, but it's damn hard, as shown from the many, many decades and billions of dollars that have gone into trying to make it happen. But we know it's possible. We know we can make it work. We just are not doing something right. Likewise with abiogenesis. Life had to come from somewhere. We're trying to figure it out. We know we can do it. Life is here. We know what life is basically composed of. We know, essentially, in all of the basic concepts here, how to make life. We don't know the specifics, but we know what goes into life because we are alive. And not just us, obviously, but see, that's the thing. They like to say, because we don't know something, it's unknowable. Therefore, God. That is called the God of the gaps, and it is an argument that proves itself wrong over and over and over.
This is very likely to not ever have happened naturally. R. Graham Cooks, who serves as the distinguished professor of analytical chemistry, said that proteins are formed from amino acids by loss of water, and loss of water in water will not occur because the process will be reversed by the water. This is thermodynamically forbidden. There are a very large number of studies showing peptide formation, but they all use catalyst or modified amino acids to make species unlikely to exist naturally. It simply just couldn't have happened naturally, and believing in so is a far stretch outside the bounds of reality.
Now, another thing that happens very frequently with people like this is that they will quote things thinking they understand it and be wrong about it. Very frequently, when something like this happens, you can just like talk to the author of whatever paper they're quoting, and the author will be like, well, no, they misunderstood what I was saying entirely. Oops, sorry about that. I can't say that's for sure what happened here. I have no idea. But I don't think one person saying this is impossible, even if he meant it, is proof that it's impossible. Clearly, a whole lot of people out there think it's possible because they are working on it. They wouldn't be working on it if they thought it was impossible. I mean, the general consensus in biology, among biologists, among chemists, seems to be it's possible. So there's one person saying, well, no, it's not. Doesn't matter. And again, to reiterate, I'm not sure that's even what is going on here. I'm not sure that person was really saying that. That's just this guy's interpretation.
There are different stages of human evolution in the theory, the latest of which are Homo habilis, Homo erectus, and Homo sapien, respectively. The debate here is, do we have a common ancestor to these species? Are they our?
Pretty sure those are our ancestors he's talking about. Now, again, I am not an expert here, but if I'm not mistaken, he is talking about our ancestor species here. So this should be something.
Our ancestors that we've evolved from, or are they a subspecies? And if we didn't evolve from them, then why did they go extinct? Did we just wipe them out and smoke them all and outperform them to their extinction?
Boy, do I have some novel ideas for this guy. I mean, okay, we can just like, I listed this earlier in the live stream, so let's go through a couple of ideas here. The first is the killer ape hypothesis. The killer ape hypothesis points out something about humanity that is maybe not very fortunate. Namely, we are a very angry and warlike species. In the geological fossil records, I mean, everywhere humanity has showed up, immediately after we show up, experiences a great die-off of larger animals. There's a reason for that. It's us. We are the reason. Before we figure out how to learn, or before we figure out how to live alongside nature, we go through a long process of just completely destroying it and eradicating it. Finally, it bites us hard enough that we're like, well, okay, we can't do that anymore. We actually need to preserve some things. But until that point, we have been destroyers. And that's where the basis of the killer ape hypothesis comes from. This idea that we just sort of killed off the other hominids in competition with them. We were smarter or stronger or in bigger numbers. I mean, for Neanderthals, they may have actually been really smart, but we would have had bigger numbers because our breeding process was a little bit faster than theirs. So we were able to overwhelm them with numbers. But I think that's also oversimplifying things just a little bit because, for example, the Neanderthal genome is well represented within humanity. Africans tend to have the lowest amount of admixture with Neanderthals. As you go to Europe, that area, there's a little bit more. In my own, there is about 2% Neanderthal DNA. As you go east into Asia, the further east you go into Asia, the more Neanderthal DNA there is, the more admixture there is. My old best friend did a test. She's Chinese, and she had about 4%. Apparently, some of her relatives actually had more than that, about 5%. And across the entire species of humanity, there's about 30% of the Neanderthal genome living within us. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time pronouncing that, but there's about 30% of the Neanderthal genome within us, contained across all of humanity. And so we at least can say that one of the reasons why they don't exist is because we sort of like, I guess, loved them out of existence, you might say, if you're being generous with the YouTube algorithms here that I don't want to insult or make mad at me. And that's not the only example. I mean, there are other species from like China, for example, that we do have admixture with. There have been some found in caves that were not Homo sapiens that we have admixture with. So there are many reasons why these species no longer exist. One of them is we potentially destroyed them. Another one is, well, love is strange, isn't it? So let's continue. Let's get past that. I'm tired of saying genome wrong.
The latest claim isn't too hard to believe, actually. If you look at the nature of our species, what would we do if somebody just claimed a brand new land, a brand new territory on the planet Earth? immediate war would be waged to gain control of the resources and of the land. We don't shake their hand and, team up like we're playing a squad in Fortnite. We go in for the kill and take all the land that we could for our own monetary and beneficial gain. That's
Correct. Very, very true, dude.
the nature of our species. Literally, every single country would wage war against this little small country that has no
Killer ape hypothesis. Look it up.
army, because what are they going to do? Stop us? We want the money and resources, so we'll do it anyways. That's how we're built. The oldest Homo sapien fossil on Earth is a skull found in Jebel Urhoud, Morocco. It was thought to initially be 40,000 years old, then it was recently reappraised in the year 2017 to actually be roughly 300,000 years old. Now this is crucial.
I'm not sure if this is true. You should probably Google it yourself. I'm not going to because I don't think it matters a whole lot. But we know that Homo sapiens in our modern form emerged somewhere around 250,000 years ago. So
Because it shakes up the entire theory of evolution by slowing down the timeline way further than is possible to hold the current theory. The difference
no, it doesn't. 50,000 years added to 250,000 is not a lot.
between our skull currently and the 300,000-year-old skull is from Jebel Urhoud was that it had a double-arched eyebrow ridge, a larger and protruding nasal cavity, a broader face, and a smaller brain casing. If that's all that happened in 300,000 years, then how many years ago were we apes? Now, if
We are apes. We are currently, at this very second, apes. But beyond that, we know we split off from chimpanzees something like 6 million years ago, at least, probably more than that, but at least 6 million years ago. So we're talking 20 times as long as 300,000 years ago. And those changes he mentioned aren't actually insignificant changes. They are pretty big changes. If you take modern Homo sapiens and modern chimpanzees and send them both back 6 million years to their common ancestor, I don't see why it would be a problem that change is so slow. These changes are happening over a very long period of time. At sometimes, I would assume, more rapid than others.
If the end of Homo erectus was set to end around 27 to 100,000 years ago, and this Jebel Urhoud Homo sapien, like us, was alive 300,000 years ago, then that must mean that erectus and sapien were alive together.
Correct, just like Homo sapiens and Neanderthals were alive at the same time. That is not a problem. That's how family trees work. I feel like even creationists should understand this, considering they think we all came from Adam and Eve. And yet, look, there's just an enormous number of branches on this tree that comes from Adam and Eve, supposedly. It should not be surprising at all. I mean, geez, you could take it back to dogs and wolves. Dogs, domesticated dogs, come from wolves. There are still wolves. They're different branches on the same tree. It's not that hard of a concept to grasp, my dude, but Jesus Christ, he sure is treating it like it is.
However, the current theory claims that we went back further and further in stages, that our species was once their species. Now, this is problematic, because not only do we have fossil records showing us that Homo erectus and Homo sapien, like us, being alive at one point, but we also have Homo habilis and Homo erectus being alive and hunting within 1 kilometer of each other at the same
Why is that a problem? I don't understand why this is supposed to be a big problem. Please, tell me why this is a problem.
exact time. For these to be alive at the same time and in the same geographical region shows us that they weren't ancestors of each other, they weren't going back in stages, and it'd be a
No, that's not what that shows us. That shows us that both species were very well adapted to the environments in which they lived in. They're shared environments, and they were very well adapted to those environments. They were just different branches on the same family tree. That's all that says. I mean, this isn't hard stuff. Humans weren't more evolved than Homo erectus, for example. We weren't. We were just evolved in a different way. We just evolved in a different direction. A very slight different direction. Not an enormous one. A very slightly different direction. It's not a big difference. And it's not a problem either. It shouldn't be, but you know how these people are.
a lot more rational to assume that they were separate entities entirely. So it's not
No, that doesn't follow, actually.
far-fetched to believe that one Homo class outperformed and wiped out the other from habilis to erectus to sapien. Another point of argument is that the
We did end up wiping them out, most likely. So that's, at least he's got that.
Earth didn't exist infinitely. So we have a timeline that we have to work with. The Earth has been a viable place of life for the last 4.6 billion years, which might make sense to you. However, we've had many mass extinction events such as the Cretaceous Paleogene event, reducing the timeline of evolution to about 66 million years only.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Does this guy believe that the extinction event 65 million years ago destroyed all life on Earth? Because we have been through, like, at least 5 major extinction events in the last, like, what, billion years or so? And life was never completely destroyed during those events. No, 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 my friend. That is not what happened. All of this life did not evolve after 65 million years. Birds came from dinosaurs. Humans came from mammals that already existed then. What is he talking about?
So with that in mind, the timeline no longer adds up. If we were still Homo sapiens for the last 300,000 years minimum, and have undergone limited evolution since, then how many years ago did we evolve from a pond of amino acids again?
Billions, probably. I mean, I'm no expert, but probably at least 1.5 billion, somewhere in that realm, maybe more than that. That's when it would have, like, probably started. So, yeah, these faces he makes, like, are truly incredible. They feel like a real put-on. Like, it seems like he's trying to use faces to make his points for him. He's saying, like, just, you know that meme where, like, somebody will be saying something and then somebody else will do the, you know, like the crazy thing. That's sort of like what he's trying to do, but it, like, doesn't work. He is not that good at it, and it just looks kind of silly.
Doesn't make sense. These fossils are probably the first thing that come to mind when you think about human evolution. A lot of these models that we've used to visualize evolution are actually so weak in authenticity that one of them is a fully fledged human-like ape model with the legs and arms and feet and everything that's fully constructed from a single tooth of a pig, my boy! When Lucy was first discovered in the 1970s, people thought that she was the missing link between humans and apes.
Okay, there is no individual missing link between humans and apes. There are a ton of, like, our ancestors we don't have, but there is no particular missing link. And is he calling Lucy a pig's tooth? Because if I'm not mistaken, Lucy is, like, real, and only one specific example of let's check it out. Lucy fossil. Let's check this out. Lucy is a collection of several hundred pieces of fossilized bone comprising 40% of the skeleton of a female of the hominin species Australopithecus afarensis. What's the thing about the pig's tooth? Is he talking about something else and just conflating them? And why is he talking about Lucy? Lucy isn't a fake fossil. Lucy is one example of Australopithecus afarensis. I think we have other examples of that, actually.
Apes. Now, experts usually agree that this was just a 3-foot-tall chimpanzee.
No, they don't. No, they do not. If you're calling creationist experts, then sure. But they're not experts, and that is not the case. He's about to bring up another example. I'm going to go ahead and look that up because I know what he's going to say already, but let's continue.
It's a human in the making. The reason that they thought so was because of their neo-Darwinian presuppositions. Remember when I mentioned earlier that the evidence fits around the theory and not the other way around?
No, what is this guy doing? What is this guy doing? Please, somebody just have a conversation with this guy, like, please, some scientist, go have a conversation with this guy. Explain to him, please.
We didn't recover any feet or hand bones from Lucy, but it was assumed that she had human feet and human hands. This further proves my point that there is a definite bias here.
Well, you can kind of assume if you have like 40% of a skeleton what the other portion will look like, generally speaking. Plus, again, Lucy was not the only example of Australopithecus afarensis. There are other examples, and they fill in the gaps quite nicely, my guy.
The Hannover Sandman was made by an anthropology professor named Rainer Prosch. He falsified age determinations of fossils during his 30-year career, and in 2010 made up data to support his claims. He literally risked and lost his entire 30 years worth of...
I have never heard of that one. What is that?
It was assumed that she had human feet and human hands. This further proves my point that there is a definite bias here. The Hanover Sandman was made by...
The Hanover Sandman. I have never heard of this. I have never heard of this in my life. Yeah, there's not a lot of information out there about this. I have no idea how he stumbled upon this. Clearly, this was not like a big or important thing, and this guy was probably just like, whoever made this thing probably just like was called out like immediately for it. So it's not even a big deal. It's not even a big thing. Oh my God. They will stick on anything though. They will find anything they can, even if it's basically irrelevant.
An anthropology professor named Rainer Prosch. He falsified age determinations of fossils during his 30-year career, and in 2010 made up data to support his claims. He literally risked and lost his entire 30 years worth of work to falsify the Hanover Sandman and ruin his entire life worth of credibility. This is the fattest L I've seen anybody take in my life, and you can see that he had...
One guy doing something wrong does not disperse with evolution as an idea, I'm sorry to say, my dude.
This determination to prove neo-Darwinian evolution to us to a point where he risked his entire life worth of credibility for it. The bias is definitely there. The Piltdown Man is one of the most famous fossil fabrications there are. 3 different evolutionary biologists collaborated on this project. It's a human skull with a modern ape jaw. They thought that mixing the two would fabricate the missing link, but it didn't.
And you know who found out that Piltdown Man was fake? I mean, nobody, first of all, as far as I'm aware, Piltdown Man wasn't really widely believed anyway. People were pretty aware from the start that it wasn't really real. And it was never accepted. And but creationists love going with that because they're like, haha, these guys fooled the whole scientific community. But no, it was never accepted. And of course they wouldn't want to point that out because it does terrible damage to their whole cause. But let's continue.
Now they just look stupid on IamLucid's YouTube channel that you're subscribed to. You're subscribed to my channel, right?
No, I'm not, and I never will be. And you should not have any subscribers because you are terribly misinforming them. But you have a really nice smile, I will say.
You're subscribed to my channel, right? You're subscribed. The Nebraska Man. This is a fully constructed, fully fledged human from a wild pig tooth. I can't make this up. The amount of creativity that went into this one was immaculate. How they turn a whole body, a model of a whole body with the arms, legs, bones, everything from a tooth of a pig.
This is another one that was never like widely believed and called out like almost immediately. And it turns out it wasn't creationists who called these people out. It was scientists. Scientists called them out. It was scientists doing the research. Scientists figured out they were fake. This guy would not know that these things were fake or misidentifications unless scientists had figured it out. And they did very quickly.
The Cardiff Giant was made by George Hull, who was an atheist. He lost the debate and wanted to prove how easily he can fool people of religion to believe in their biblical giants. So he hired some guys $3,000 to make their own 10-foot biblical giant and then buried it. This fake fossil ended up selling for $23,000, which of today's time would equal $500,000.
Well, it clearly worked. Good job, my dude.
Unbelievable.
I mean, I think that's a point proven. I don't know why he's bringing this up exactly.
The Cardiff Giant was believed to be real and was exhibited in multiple museums. 3,000 people actually came out to see it because they thought it was totally authentic. And then we ended up realizing that it wasn't real because he got drunk at a party and revealed that it was fake himself. The Pecking Man was supposed to be
The Pecking Man. The Pecking Man. It is... Wow, okay, that's not how you say that, first of all. It's Peking Man, not Pecking Man.
missing link, but then somehow all of the evidence has disappeared. I'm not joking. It's supposed to be like a Homo erectus human being that lived in China, that had huge protrusive eye sockets, but I guess we'll never know because it's gone. And
it was one example of what, Homo erectus, was it? Let's see if this was Homo erectus. Peking Man is a subspecies of Homo erectus, which I hate to break it to you, but just like Lucy, we do have other examples of Homo erectus. This is not the only one ever found, and this one disappearing is not really that big of a deal. Like, it does suck, I guess, because it's good to have these things, and they're irreplaceable, obviously. But it's not the only example of Homo erectus we have. We have other examples, so it's not that big of a deal, my guy.
it disappeared out of nowhere.
All right, so we're going to call it here at Darwinian Racism. I will do another video on this soon, but this one's getting a little bit too long. But yeah, this is fascinating stuff, and by fascinating, I mean terrible stuff, because, you know, this reminds me of another video I did recently, where I just was like, it was the dinosaur denial video, where it's just like, how much false information can one person fit into a video? And it turns out the answer is quite a lot. You can fit so much misinformation into one video. This is 40 minutes of pure misinformation and disinformation, and it's been seen by, what, hundreds of thousands of people? This is not good. This just shows how easy it is to propagandize to people online and make them question very important things. I mean, evolution is the backbone of modern science, like modern genetic science and biological sciences. And to question that is to question so much of all, like, the important biological sciences out there. And it really does rob us of something very important, because you can imagine a lot of people might have become biologists who just are sort of like, well, this stuff isn't real. Why should I become a biologist now? And they just don't. And they never learn it because they don't want to learn about evolution, thinking it's fake. And we lose valuable minds. We lose valuable scientific minds who could have made the world a better place because of videos like this. It's not harmless. It's very dangerous.